Ready to get to work? Let's get to work. Actually, I did all the work without you. Sorry. Alright, so this is part 3 of the tunnel tutorial, and the good news is that I'm going to do part 3. The bad news is that when I was actually doing the work and recording, my mic became unplugged and I didn't realize it. So this is just going to be an overview of how I finish stuff up. So we're going to go in here. We've got this clip, and I did this for many clips. So I'll show you what I did. Same thing. But anyway, I had a different tunnel scene. You notice this one is a bit different than this one. It's supposed to be a different area in the tunnel, so I made 2 different tunnels. But what we have here, this finished shot, actually I'll take you through it in Premiere because it'll run a lot quicker. So I have this finished shot.
Isn't that right?
I'm glad there are some details about this you're able to grasp.
And that is from this original shot.
Isn't that right?
I'm glad there are some details about this you're able to grasp.
Okay, so like I said, really to get this whole thing, you got to watch part 1 and part 2 of the previous live streams, which are on my YouTube channel, or maybe I think I posted them to my Facebook as well. But anyway, so the reason that I did this setup in my garage was I wanted a wall that his flashlight could actually react to, instead of building a 100% virtual tunnel around him. But I didn't want, I wanted the tunnel to go deep into the darkness. I could have animated a flashlight on the wall, but believe me, in After Effects, unless you're some sort of genius, getting a flashlight to track along with the flashlight here and make it look like it's on the wall and not an After Effects thing, because After Effects, man, if you don't play it really smart, After Effects really looks like After Effects. I've seen some really great short films where people have used After Effects, but they've just followed the tutorial exactly instead of trying to finesse it. And that's where people are really end up being worth their weight in gold if you hire them to do After Effects with you, is they're able to finesse it, not just follow the tutorial step by step and get the the result that you see on Andrew Kramer's videos or something like that. Andrew Kramer's great, believe me, and I think Andrew Kramer would definitely agree with me. A tutorial will teach you how to do the technical stuff, but you need to be an artist and finesse it. Every situation, every bit of footage is a bit different. So now that I got that disclaimer out of the way, like I said, I had the I wanted him to shine the flashlight on the wall so it showed that he was actually interacting with the environment, which helps sell the effect. And then add the rest of the tunnel around him. So let's go into After Effects, and so what we have here is we have the tunnel walk, and this is a pre-comp. So I pre-composed, let's see, where is the pre-comp for that? I'll just click on it. Alright, so here's the pre-comp, and I'm going to kind of remove all the effects so you see what I did. Around there. Okay, so in the previous tutorials you saw me green screen this, and let's go to effects. So first thing I did was I added the tunnel, which is a Photoshop layer. So that is this layer here, and then in this next layer here I did some color corrections, level, color balance. You've seen me do that a million times. So again, this is finessing. I don't have exact numbers to match this. And then I went in and I clicked on this layer and you didn't see any changes, but there is a change actually. Let's see if I can zoom in here, and that is grain. 7Ds, which I shot this with a Canon 7D, which is a crop sensor DSLR camera, and it has compression artifacts. So if you look, you probably can't see it, but there's moving compression noise on this side. So I had to go in and I had to add some compression noise in the background here. You can definitely see the compression noise in his face here. So without the compression noise, you see the compression here and here, but not here. And what that does is that gives this away as a still image, as a Photoshop image. Now, I'm probably going to go in and use a denoiser after, but I don't know how effective it's going to be, and there's only so much denoise you can do before it starts to distort your footage. And besides, I kind of like the grain. You know, it's not, these days grain is frowned upon. It's not ideal, but you know, if you look at movies shot on film, especially some of the lower budget ones like Easy Rider, you know, 16mm film, you get you get that grain. It's a look. So I wanted to make sure everything was consistent. I figured adding animated grain, just a little bit, would sell this as a complete effect. So next up, I added another layer, which was just more. Let's get back into what I had over here. Was, let's see if I click away from it. Oops. I was just adding darkness because this was too light. Oh, and let's go back in here. Let's turn these back on. You know, I color corrected it to match. But I just noticed that, oops, this just looked a little too light. Let's zoom in on it. This looked a little too light in comparison to this, especially when he gets further down the tunnel here. So I just darkened that up. And you can see it's kind of more consistent lighting look. And then let's go into here. Now, let's bring him back. So when he crosses over to here, we had an issue with his head disappearing into this part of the layer here. So my solution to that was to duplicate this layer of him walking. Oops, not that one. This one here. If you can see, I did a mask around his head so that we could have his head not getting chopped into by the background that we built. Why it's doing that, I'm not going to get into right now, but it is in the other live streams. But we wanted to make sure that the top of his head was in the right place. And then here, I had duplicated the layer here as well, and I added, I literally went into blend modes and went to add. I wanted to brighten up this highlight around him, because otherwise, let's turn on these other adjustment layers. He's just too much in the dark. I wanted to highlight him a bit. And I figured since other people have flashlights in the scene, that was acceptable to highlight that. Just bring a little more shape to him. So once I had that done, I went in and this is a vignette that I created by just adjusting the levels. But I thought that, you know, this tunnel looks just way too well lit. We need to really make this dark and spooky. You know, make you feel like a creature could come running out of the dark and grab you at any second. So I created a vignette to kind of get rid of some of these highlights here. And then here, this really bothered me how bright this was. So I actually created another mask in an adjustment layer, and I played with the levels and the hue and the saturation some more. So I wanted to take the blue down a little bit. It was too blue and too light. So I did a mask around that. And he walks into the mask, but he's already so darkened in the shadows that, you know, it makes sense visually. And then last but not least, I did a whole level of curves, levels, curves, color balance, hue and saturation, just to tie everything together. And that is it for that. But we're not done, because as you've noticed, I wanted to create a little bit of a fake anamorphic lens flare for him. A little bit of, you know, I like lens flares, you know. I mean, and I feel bad that, you know, everyone kind of got turned off of them from J.J. Abrams and Star Trek. They didn't bother me. I like the idea behind him. His thing with that was the future's so bright that, you know, it can't be contained, and that's why there's so many lens flares. You know, although I think it only worked for Star Trek. You know, you can't take it into Star Wars. It's so weird, by the way. Just a side note. I loved what J.J. Abrams did with Star Trek. I thought it, you know, it fit. People complained about it, but, you know, it fit. It kind of like supercharged the energy of the original Star Trek. You know, are they great movies? No, but they're fun movies. I thought the first one was particularly good. And I really hated what he did with Star Wars. You know? And apparently he wasn't much of a Star Trek fan, but he loves Star Wars. So maybe the lesson there is, if you're a fan of something, don't try and improve it. If you're not a fan, you can look at it maybe a little more objectively. I don't know. As an aside, you can let me know what you think in the comments of that little comment, but, you know, I mean, people argue about it. Remember, it's just a movie. A popcorn studio movie, you know, to be exact. We're not making 2001: A Space Odyssey. Anyway, so the reason that I didn't do the lens flare in here, I'm going to get to now, but this comes down to why I pre-comped it. So here's the pre-comp, and I wanted to motion track it. So here, let's turn this off. So I motion tracked this, and you know, there are plenty of motion tracking tutorials out there. There's just a 1-point motion track on the flashlight, made a null object. And then I came in with this, and let's see. Let me open this up in Photoshop, because I think I did that the last time. All right, scenes. No. Edit base, B-roll. Effects assets there. That's where I was keeping them. So I have in Photoshop here. You can buy lens flare packets, and they're very nice, but I don't like to spend money. This is household filmmaking. I don't have money. That's why I have a PayPal and a Patreon. You know, and by the way, the internet bill is due. So if these are helping you and you want to contribute, look down there. There's a little donate button for PayPal, or you can become a patron on Patreon. That would be really cool too. But enough about that. So what I did here was I came in with a paintbrush, and I just made a few little spots. Blue dot, blue spot. Let's zoom in on this. Blue spot and purple spot and a white spot, and then I just did a little radial blur, and then I just stretched it out and saved it as a layer. Easy as pie. And then I imported that layer into here, and then I was able to control the width of it. You know, you just adjust the scaling, and then I did a blend mode, and in this case it was linear light. It's not always going to be linear light. It could be overlay. Just depends on the environment that you're in. And then I just parented it to the null object, and, you know, made sure that the opacity, as he turned away, the opacity faded. And then of course, you know, if the angle of the light is narrower, you know, narrow this little thing, or if he's full on, widen it. You know, that's all done in your keyframes. You see position, scale, opacity. See the opacity is fading now that he's walking away, because obviously if there's no flashlight there should be no lens flare. Now I did use an actual lens flare on here. It is just your standard Adobe stock lens flare that comes with the program. Here it is. There's different kinds you can use, and I just had the opacity at generally 5% because I didn't want a big stupid glaring lens flare. God, you know, you know, when Photoshop first came out, this is what the lens flares look like. And so there's your generic Photoshop lens flare. You do not want to use that. Like I said, there are lens flare plugins, but I made my own. And in this instance, I didn't mind using the lens flare because when you use, especially this, what they call the 105mm prime, you know, and you turn it down to 5%, you know, it's just a little shine. It's nothing obvious as a lens flare. You do get, I think somewhere in here you might see a little bit of that. Yeah, it's like very, very faint up here. I don't know if you can see that right there. But, you know, it's a lens flare, but if you match it with like your Photoshop thing that you create, then it blends in and nobody's going to notice. But I didn't want to go for those crazy Photoshop lens flares. If you need crazy bright lens flares, then yes, please go get the plugin, or you know, see what you can do to make your own. There's really, you know, you have Photoshop, and Photoshop can do pretty much anything. I've never encountered a problem that could not be solved in Photoshop, you know, as far as still images go. So anyway, so that's how I did that. That's how we finished up the project. And you know, if you see in here, I did the same thing here. Again, I won't run. Where'd it go? Weird. Huh. I'll run through the premiere thing here. Let's just watch the scene now. Okay, so there's a little bit of a spoiler here. So if you don't want spoilers, skip to the end, because I'm about to wrap up. So you can see maybe like a minute from the end or something. So here we go. Here's the scene with the, here, let's expand this out. Here's the scene with the After Effects stuff put in. I'll skip ahead a little bit so you don't see the whole thing.
Oh, wow. Not cool. What is that smell anyways? Is this a sewer?
It's a wash. When it rains, this is where the runoff from the streets go. Or under the streets. Isn't that right?
I'm glad there are some details about this you're able to grasp.
Jeez, man, what a jerk. Okay, let's just skip ahead. Start here.
Jacob? Jacob, can you come take a look at this?
What'd you find?
so you get it. So just for fun, let's hide that layer so we can see one more time what it looked like before the effects.
What'd you find?
There's an eye drawn on the ceiling.
So you get the idea. Alright, so I will wrap it up there. It's been a very short episode, so I apologize again for the mishap of the other episode I recorded while actually doing this work, having no audio. But I figure it's just easy enough to give you an overview, and you get the idea. So, having said that, everybody, you got your film going? You're making a film right now, right? Short film, whatever. So get to work.